This is why you should never open your door for strangers. In 2013, a woman let her dog out to use the bathroom one more time before bed. After only a few minutes, she starts hearing scratching on her door, which is typically the sound her dog makes when he's ready to come in. But it just seemed way too soon for him to be done being outside. So she decides to look through the peephole to make sure it really is her dog. But what she sees is terrifying. A deranged-looking man is right outside her door, staring intently at her door handle, waiting for it to turn open. As she's looking in horror, unable to do anything, he starts scratching at the door as hard as he can, never leaving his gaze from the door handle. She manages to stifle a scream, she backs away and realizes her dog is still outside. So she goes to the side window, but there's no sign of her dog, and so she goes back to the door to see if maybe the man's moved. He hasn't moved, his mouth is open, and he's staring directly at the peephole. Then he turns around and walks away. With the man gone, she discovers her dog unharmed, his leash had just been cut. But that means he had a knife. This is why you should always trust your gut. In the early 1970s, a college student decided to hitchhike his way home after class. A car pulls up, a man offers him a ride, and he climbs in. As soon as the car started moving, the student felt totally uneasy, like something was wrong but he couldn't quite place it. Without saying anything, he waited till the next time they slowed down and he flung the door open and ran away. 2 years later, he's flicking through TV channels when he comes across this special interview with a death row inmate. And it's just the audio recording, so he hears the interviewer ask the inmate, "Why did you remove all the door handles inside of your car?" The man just goes, "Well, the first time I tried to kill someone, I picked up a college hitchhiker who got smart at some point and jumped out of my car. So, lesson learned, remove all the door handles." When they showed his picture, the student knew immediately that he was supposed to be the first victim of John Wayne Gacy, aka the Killer Clown, who had killed over 30 men and boys in his clown room and stuffed them into his basement. This is why you should always trust your gut. In the 1970s, a young couple decided to go for a late-night hike in the woods. A couple minutes into their walk, and the man remembers thinking, something's not right. He tells his girlfriend, but they just decide to ignore it and keep going, until he steps on something that felt really soft, like it was alive. Before he has a chance to see what he stepped on, they hear all this rustling in the bushes next to them, and they bolt. Years later, that couple turns on the TV, and a death row inmate who's about to be executed is being interviewed. And they ask him, "Was there ever a time that you were almost caught red-handed?" He responded, "Yes, one time. I was in the woods, and a couple walked through, and the man actually stepped on the body of a girl I had just killed. I was hiding in the bushes just a few feet away. They didn't see me." That couple had run into one of the worst serial killers of all time, Ted Bundy.
If she ever asks you this one question, always say no. A hospital receptionist was working late one night when he saw a strange figure approach him in the darkness. When they came closer, it appeared to be a pale woman with a wide smile and soaking black hair. The receptionist asked the woman if she was there to see someone. She simply nodded and said, "Do you reject the Trinity?" He replied, "I'm sorry?" She then slowly backed away and left. A few hours passed, and a little girl came to his desk from her hospital room. He asked her if she was feeling alright, and she said that she did not like the new nurse. He said, "Sweetie, what do you mean?" And she told him that the nurse was asking all the children the same question, and they were all chanting yes, yes, but she was too afraid to answer. The man then sprinted to the hallway where the children were staying, and none of them were to be found. The hospital then went into lockdown, and the only remains of the children were their clothes laying on their bed. I can guarantee that the end of this video is going to shock you. There was a young girl who had trouble making friends because her mom wouldn't let her play with the other kids in the neighborhood. One day, the mom left to go to the store, so she snuck outside of the house. She grabbed her teddy bear and went outside, but still, none of the kids wanted to play with her. Eventually, a strange-looking boy approached her and said that he wanted to be her friend. The little girl was thrilled to finally have a friend her age, and he eventually asked if she wanted to come to his house to play. When they arrived, the little girl was confused, because the house appeared to be abandoned like no one had been in there for years. They walked into his garden, and immediately the girl threw up. She asked him for some water, and he just smiled at her creepily and said, "You're going to sleep here sometime soon." Weeks later, the girl went looking for him, and he was nowhere to be found. Soon, a paper airplane flew to her, and it was a newspaper clipping. She opened it up to find that the boy she'd been playing with went missing 9 years ago. Disturbing and mysterious things found on Google Maps, Part 1. And I'll reveal what's blurred out in this image at the end of the video, so keep watching. This is a rooftop view of Peabody Place Entertainment and Retail Center in Memphis, Tennessee. If you look closely, you can see that somebody spray painted the phrase, "Come downtown and play," on top of the building. Appreciate the invite, but I'ma have to pass. This photo was taken in Tokyo in 2013. I feel like I don't have to explain what's wrong with it because it's pretty damn creepy, but I will say this. It was not planned. This is just 8 grown adults chilling out wearing pigeon heads. This photo of a baby crawling around outside of a Gucci store is disturbing. Either he's a fan of designer clothing or he just has some really bad parents. This photo was taken in France in 2008. It shows a mysterious dark figure with glowing eyes standing on an apartment balcony. You'd assume that it's some strange mannequin, but when Google reviewed it, they actually blurred out the image as if they were hiding something. Send this video to someone that is absolutely terrified of clowns. A young boy named Nathan was walking alone to meet up with some friends at a nearby carnival. When he arrived, they rode roller coasters and eventually made their way to a circus tent with live performers. They went inside and saw a group of clowns performing. They were dancing, juggling, and one of them was riding a unicycle. The boys got closer to the stage, and the one riding the unicycle slipped and fell, and his red nose landed right beside Nathan, who picked it up, put it in his pocket, figuring the clown had plenty more. After the show was over, Nathan was walking back home when suddenly he heard a slight chuckle. He turned around and shined his flashlight. He could make out a shadowy figure holding a sharp object in his hand. The figure said in a creepy, sinister voice, "I believe you have something of mine." Nathan slowly backed away, pleading, "No, I don't. Please leave me alone." The figure stepped into the light. It was the clown from the carnival. He said, "Well, if you're not going to give me my nose, I'm gonna need yours." This is why you should never stay awake past 3 a.m. A woman in her early 20s was away from home on a business trip. The night before she was supposed to board her plane, she had trouble sleeping and had this intense fear that someone was staring at her in her room. She was up until 3, tossing and turning until she started to hear whispers. It was a deep voice repeating the words, "I'm coming to get you. I'm coming to get you." But she ignored it and eventually fell asleep. After her plane landed, she was exhausted but drove home anyway. About 30 minutes into her drive, she started hearing the same whispers from the previous night, but she thought it was because she was sleep deprived, so she kept driving. She was almost home when she began to feel sick. Her eyes were watering, her nose was running, and she let out a large sneeze. "Bless you," said the same deep, eerie voice. She quickly pulled into her driveway, hugged her husband, and sat down to tell him what was going on. When this happened,
I can still hear that voice.
here's why you should never turn your Snapchat location on. One night, a girl was home alone sitting in her bedroom watching TV when she got a notification on her phone. She opened her Snapchat to find a photo of Max, a strange lonely boy at school who had asked for her Snapchat a few days before. In the Snapchat, Max was grinning very creepily. The text read, "Are you alone?" She was about to block him when she received another chat from Max that said, "You live on Moorhead Lane, right?" As soon as she opened it, she heard a tapping on her window. It was Max. He was staring directly at her with a disturbing grin on his face. She screamed before shutting the blinds and calling the police. But when they arrived, they said there was no one on the property and he must have ran away. The girl was haunted by Max, but eventually she went to sleep. She woke up the next morning to find that she had received another Snapchat from Max. It was of her in her bed sleeping, taken 3 hours ago. This will make you never want to go on Omegle ever again. 2 teenage girls were bored one night, but they recalled seeing videos on YouTube of a website where you could chat with random strangers on the internet. They went onto the site and eventually came upon a young boy playing with his dog. They talked with him for a bit and said that he might be a little too young to be on this website, but he assured them that he was 13 years old. Some time passed and they were about to skip to the next person when the girls noticed something moving in the background behind him. The dog started barking and jumped out of the boy's lap when suddenly a tall figure came out of the shadows. The girls were urging the boy to turn around when suddenly there was a gunshot. The boy turned around and began to scream, while his dog lay dead on the floor. The figure grabbed the boy and yelled at him to be quiet, and then he shut the laptop. The girls never knew what happened to the boy, but they did know that they were never going on this site ever again. This is why you should never go on a Tinder date past 3 a.m. A man was up late one night scrolling on his phone when suddenly he matched with a girl named Sarah on a dating site. She instantly messaged him and said that she was really bored and he should come to hang out at her place. Sarah sent him the address, so he called an Uber and hopped in the back seat when his driver pulled up. They chatted for some time and eventually pulled up to the house, which the driver said looked strangely familiar. He told the man to be very careful, so he paid him, got out, and began to approach the door. He messaged Sarah and told her that he was waiting outside the front door. when suddenly he saw a figure staring through the window. He then received a call from an unknown number. He picked it up, assuming it was Sarah, but it was his Uber driver. He was breathing very heavily and said, "Your payment didn't go through, I'm coming back to pick you up." He got back in and the driver told him that a deranged man was luring people into that same house and torturing them to death. Insane courtroom reactions during sentencing, Part 1. In 2013, 16-year-old Dylan Shoemaker was babysitting his girlfriend's 2-year-old son when suddenly, the child began to cry. Dylan brutally beat the child to death to get him to stop crying and was later put into police custody. At his court hearing, he immediately began sobbing and apologizing to the victim's family, claiming he was sorrowful for his actions.
I didn't mean to kill Austin. I really didn't. Face the judge, sir. I didn't mean to hurt him. Ashley, you know I loved Austin.
In response, the judge of the case stated that Dylan was a manipulator and he was responsible for so much pain in his short life. He also brought up the fact that in the phone call to his mother, Dylan had stated that all he had to do was cry in front of the jury and they'd feel sorry for him. After this, he was sentenced to 25 years to life behind bars. Creepy historical photos that will haunt your nightmares, Part 5. This photo shows a 15-foot great white shark floating in a tank of formaldehyde found in an abandoned Australian wildlife park. This first responder is helping to aid the Australian wildfires that were started at the beginning of 2020. They caused so much damage and destruction that they actually turned the entire Australian sky red. This shows a female patient undergoing treatment in 19th century Germany. They believe that the crucifixion pose would cure her mental illness. This appears to be an ordinary Chinese statue of Buddha. But when scientists placed it into a CT scanner, they found what appeared to be the mummy of a 1,000-year-old Buddha monk. Okay, I don't know about y'all, but 2020 is not the year that we should be messing with mummies and seeing what's inside of them. If you're already scared of the ocean, just wait till you watch the footage at the end of this video. In April of 2000, Russian diver Yuri Lipsky strapped on his helmet camera in an air tank and sank to his death while diving in the Blue Hole off the coast of Egypt in the Red Sea. Lipsky died at just 300 feet underwater. At this depth, the body is subject to nitrogen narcosis, which can induce symptoms similar to alcohol intoxication. When a diver went to retrieve Lipsky's body, he made an unsettling discovery. He realized that Lipsky's helmet camera was still intact and the diver had recorded his own death. This is why you should never get McDonald's past 3 a.m. A man and his girlfriend were in a McDonald's drive-thru deciding what to eat, but they were quite disturbed by the sinister voice on the other side of the intercom. When it was time to pay, the girl had to use the restroom, so she hopped out of the car, went inside, and walked into the stall. Suddenly, she heard the door swing open, and the person who walked in was breathing very heavily. She ignored it for a few minutes, but the breathing got gradually closer. She peeked through the crack of the stall when she saw an eye staring right back at her. She pretended like she didn't notice, but then the person said in a chilling voice, "How long do you think it'll take him to notice that something's wrong?" It was the employee from the window. She swung the door open, hitting him right in the face, and made a run for the car. He tried chasing her, but was soon stopped by her boyfriend who knocked him out cold. He called the cops, and needless to say, this was the last time they visited McDonald's at night ever again. If something like this ever happens to you, just remember, it's not real. A teenage boy woke up in the middle of the night and was unable to move anything except for his eyes. He then noticed a shadowy figure standing beside his bedroom door. It appeared to be a dark figure with razor-sharp teeth. The boy was absolutely terrified. It came closer to the boy and whispered, "I'll come get you when you're ready to die." Suddenly, the figure transformed into a familiar-looking man. It slowly backed up toward the door when the boy realized it was his father. The boy attempted to call out, "Dad," but his sleep paralysis kept him from doing so. They looked at each other for a few minutes, but then the boy's vision became less foggy and he was able to think more clearly. He leapt out of his bed screaming for his dad when he was met by his mother in the hallway. She said, "It's okay, sweetie. I miss him too," because his dad had died 2 months before this. This is the haunting story of Jeff the Killer. Jeff was a young boy who moved into a new home with his family. One day, 3 teenage boys decided to attack Jeff and his brother, but Jeff managed to fight them off, leaving them in the streets with broken wrists and knife wounds. Unfortunately, after the incident, Jeff realized that he genuinely enjoyed inflicting pain and suffering on others. Later that night, Jeff's mother began to hear a strange noise coming from the bathroom of their house. It sounded like someone was crying. When she entered the room, she found Jeff carving a permanent smile into his cheeks, and she also realized that he had cut off his eyelids so he wouldn't have to sleep. Jeff's final words to his mother were, "Mom, you lied," after which he murdered his entire family and disappeared into the night. He was never seen again, but legend has it, he's looking for his next victim. Videos that seem innocent but have a terrifying backstory, Part 2. This video shows a man playing Dance Dance Revolution being unknowingly recorded by some people who are making fun of him. The man, Adam Lanza, 6 months later would shoot his mother in the head 4 times while she was asleep and then drive to Sandy Hook Elementary School, where he would murder 6 adults and 20 children between the ages of 6 and 7. A popular 18-year-old CSGO YouTuber uploaded a reveal of the supercar he had just bought. He had a stream account containing around $100,000 of in-game items, which was banned 6 months later, causing him to have a mental breakdown and commit suicide. He intentionally drove the vehicle into a van, killing him, a mother, and her 12-year-old daughter. This video shows Chris Watts pleading for the return of his pregnant wife and 2 daughters.
If somebody has her and they're not safe, like, I want them back now.
He later confessed to strangling his daughters, hiding them in an oil tank, and burying his wife.
This is why you always say yes to tandoori chicken. In 2012, a high school tutor and her student stayed up so late one night studying that by the time they were done, the buses had stopped running. Without another way home, the student asked if he could stay the night at her place. Reluctantly, she agreed. When they got back to the apartment, she fell asleep on her bed and he fell asleep on a blanket next to her bed on the ground. A few hours later, she wakes up to the boy standing awkwardly in the middle of the room with a very strange look on his face. She asks him, "What's wrong?" He looks at her and says, "I'm really hungry. Let's go get some tandoori chicken." Confused, she says, "It's 2 a.m. Just get a snack in the cupboard." And he grabs her by the arm and he says, "No, we are getting tandoori chicken right now." And he yanks her from the bed. Feeling totally caught off guard by this whole situation, she goes into the hall with the boy, and as soon as the door shuts behind them, she can tell that he is terrified. He looks at her and just says, "I'm not actually hungry. When I woke up, there was someone under your bed."